Hello everyone, and welcome to this bonus edition of the Chronicler podcast channel. Today's episode is going to move pretty much completely away from historical facts, so to speak, and focus on the more cultural aspects of Chinese society. But firstly, Happy Chinese New Year everyone! And today is the day where we move away from the year of the rat and move on to the year of the ox. If you want to hear how the Chinese say it, it's simply Xin Nian Kuai La. Now this festival has many other names, such as the Spring Festival, or again in Chinese, Chunjie. It's a time where families travel away from China's massive urban centres and head back to their hometowns to spend time with their families. To give you a scale of the holiday, in 2016 it is estimated that 2.9 billion passenger journeys were made across China during the festive period. That's an insane number. And the thing is, since 2016, the numbers have probably increased. Talk about planes, trains and automobiles, eh? This upward trend probably would have been the same for this year, but COVID-19 had other ideas. And sadly, I am a victim of that, as I should be in my wife's hometown celebrating the festival with the in-laws, but sadly I'm not. And then this is where this idea came in, where I could make a bonus episode, because I'm not with my wife's family and celebrating the new year. I'm just stuck in my flat in Beijing. So I thought, I might as well record the podcast episode whilst I'm here. If you want to compare the Chinese New Year to anything in the West, I would probably compare it to Christmas. Many of the practices are the same, apart from the religious aspect of it. For example, travelling home and eating turkey with the family sounds about right, right? In China, you travel home and rather than eating turkey, you eat dumplings with your family. So you can see the differences, but also the similarities. It's a time where you can simply forget about work, see your family, and just relax. Now the problem is that every year, usually, I would go back to my wife's hometown in Tianjin, and I am never relaxed. Why? Because nobody speaks a bloody word of English. And my Chinese is probably survivalist at best. I think I'm the only white guy to ever enter her village, so I get lots of stares. And as well as that, video recording behind my back. Yeah, that happens. And as well as that, I always have to be on my guard, just in case, somebody asks me a question and I don't know what they're saying. It happens all the time, where relatives would ask me a question and I'm like, what'd I say? What did she say? What'd I do? Oh no, I don't know what to do. Because that's the thing as well, there's lots of rules in the new year that I'm not totally familiar with, and my wife then has to explain it to me in English, and there's even times where one of her relatives would ask me a question and I understand it, and then I reply in Chinese, but then they don't know what I just said. That can happen as well, and it's like all the different dialects and stuff that come into it. Like, I'm used to hearing people from Beijing, but when I go to Tianjin, they speak a different kind of dialect, so it sounds totally different sometimes. I suppose you could, I'm from Scotland, so if it's like a Scotsman trying to speak to an Englishman or something along those lines, it can be difficult, Now the thing is, I've made this sound worse than what it actually is, in this sense. Don't be discouraged if you come to China and you see someone recording you. It's more than likely that they haven't seen a foreigner before, and this only happens in villages mostly. It doesn't happen in the cities where things are more multicultural. And despite this, the food. Oh man, the food you get for the holiday is just awesome. My mother-in-law cooks amazing food, and it's great because she's always trying to stuff my face, because it's part of Chinese hospitality. So it's just keep feeding the guest almost. It's great. I love it. So yeah, like that. The families really go all out for the holiday. Where there are plenty and plenty and plenty of dishes alongside those dumplings that you need to eat. If you're trying to lose weight during the winter and gearing up for your summer body, avoid a Chinese family during the Spring Festival. All your hard work would be for naught. But anyway, very much like Christmas, there are usually stories associated with festivities, right? And the Chinese New Year is no different from the rest of the world with this regard. Now moving forward, I will introduce the stories, state little, if any, historical reference, then tell the story as if I am speaking to a child. Because that's what these have become now. They're children's stories. The first story I'm going to discuss is the story of the Great Race. The Great Race is where the Chinese zodiac comes from. So think of the year of the ox, the year of the dragon, the year of the tiger, etc. This story describes why they are positioned the way they are. In terms of historical reference, I can't really find much. The only thing that I can find is that the story supposedly originates all the way back to the mythical period. So remember Huangdi and Shunong? Yeah, it originates with those guys. If you want to go with the narrative, it kind of makes sense, as Huangdi did, by all accounts, invent the lunar calendar, which is where the zodiac and the New Year is based on already. Now further to this, from doing little research online, I found that the story was first written down during the Han Dynasty. However, I could be totally wrong on that front, just because I didn't do a lot of research on its originality. And you're probably thinking, why didn't you do much research? And the reason being is, I don't want this to be about a historical debate. I want it to be more about the storytelling. And, with further ado, put on child storytelling voice. Here it goes. A long time ago, in China, the Jade Emperor decided there should be a way to measure time. He told all of the animals in the world that they were to compete in a race to cross over a river. The first animals to arrive the next day would be allowed to compete in the race. The first 12 animals would be rewarded by having a year named after them. So which animals managed to turn up the next day? Well, you had the rat and the cat, the pig, the ox, the rooster, the tiger, the monkey, the rabbit, the goat, the dragon, the horse, and the snake. The rat and the cat, who were good friends at this time, were worried, as they were not very good at swimming. So they asked the ox if he would carry them across on his back. The ox agreed, to which the cat and the rat were so happy. Now that all the animals were there, they had to rest for one night before the big race. And the rat and the cat, being good friends, went to sleep next to each other. The cat knew that he wasn't good at getting up early, so he asked the rat to wake him up super early so they could get a head start. The rat told him not to worry and said he would wake him up. On the day of the race, all of the animals lined up beside the river. But where was the cat? Oh no! The rat got so excited for the race that he forgot to wake up the cat. The cat was still sleeping. On your marks, get set, go! And so the race started. The ox had completely forgotten that there was a rat on his back, and they were in first place. They were almost across the river at the other side, and all of a sudden, the rat jumped off of the ox and landed at first place. "Well done," said the Jade Emperor to the rat. "The first year of the zodiac will be named after you." The poor ox was tricked into second place, and so the second year of the zodiac was named after him. Shortly after, the exhausted tiger arrived on the riverbank. Swimming the river had been very difficult, as he had to fight strong currents. The next to arrive was the rabbit, who hadn't swum across, but hopped across on some stepping stones, and then onto a floating log, which carried him to the riverbank. "I shall call the fourth year after you," the surprised Jade Emperor said. Taking fifth place was the dragon. "How come you didn't win the race when you could fly across?" the Emperor asked. "I stopped to help some animals," the dragon explained. Heading towards the line was the horse. Just as the Emperor thought the horse would cross, the sly snake wriggled around one of the horse's hooves. The horse was so surprised that he jumped backwards, giving the snake a chance to slither forward and take sixth place. The horse made it for seventh place. Not long afterwards, a raft arrived carrying the goat, the monkey, and the rooster. They explained how they had worked as a team to get across. The Emperor was very pleased. He said the goat would be the 8th year, the monkey the 9th, and the rooster the 10th. The next animal to arrive was the duck. "What took you so long when you're such a good swimmer?" asked the Emperor. "The river was so clean that I decided to have a bath along the way," the dog explained. He was rewarded with the 11th year. There was one place left in the zodiac, and the Emperor wondered who the last winner would be. All of a sudden, the pig turned up. "You took a long time. What happened?" the Emperor asked. "I was hungry and stopped to eat. Then I fell asleep," said the pig. The 12th year was given to the pig. As for the cat, he finally woke up and started frantically swimming across the river. Eventually, the cat crawled out of the river, but was too late to have a year named after him. He was very angry with the rat for letting him sleep in, and ever since then, cats have never been friends with rats. From that day to this, the Chinese zodiac has followed this cycle of years, named after the 12 animals. The end. So there you have it. That is the end of the first story. And I must admit, I felt really sorry for the cat in this one. And there's probably a good reason which explains their attitude these days. Now, we'll move on to the second story. The second story is about a monster called Nian. Now, I did try and find some information on where the legend originated, but unfortunately, I came up empty-handed. If anyone does know, then feel free to educate me here. But like I said, today isn't about the history, it's more about the stories and the myths. So without further ado, here is the story of Nian. Once upon a time, long, long ago, there lived a monster in China called Nian. He lived under the sea in a cave and slept most of the year. He only awoke for one day each year. the last day before the Lunar New Year began. The warmer weather woke him and he arose from the sea, hungry and ferocious. Nian was a man-eater. He would come to the villages in China each year to devour people and wreck their houses. Many had tried to battle with the mighty Nian. Many had tried, and all had failed. The people of one particular village were so terrified that every year they fled up the hills to try and escape the wrath of Nian. One year, on the eve of the Lunar New Year, an old traveller came to the village. He was bent and weary from his travels, and he desperately wanted food and lodging. He went to the door of a house to beg for food, but the woman inside turned him away. She had no time for beggars because she was preparing for the move up the mountain. The old man tried to ask a young girl on the street for help, but she was too busy as well. She had to find her brothers and sisters and start the long walk up the mountains to escape the monster. The only person who paid the old man any notice at all was an old woman. She was sweeping outside her house and realised the traveller needed food. She walked inside and returned to the man with a bowl of dumplings. While the old traveller ate, he sat and watched the villagers running around. He asked what all the fuss was about, and the woman explained that because Nian was coming that night, the villagers were going to hide in the hills to ensure that their village was overlooked by the monster. The woman looked worried, and the old man asked her why. The old woman didn't think she would be able to make the trip up the hills that year. Her bones were old, and she was weary. The old man smiled to himself. He knew how to repay the old woman's kindness. He could tell her how to make sure that the monster Nian never bothered her village again. The next morning, the villagers returned to their houses. They had spent the night in the hills and had feared bangs and seen bright lights coming from the village. They feared that Nian had destroyed their homes, but as they walked down the main street, the people were amazed. Their houses were still standing. Everything looked peaceful. The old woman who refused to come to the hills was outside her home, smiling. "How did you survive Nian?" the villagers asked the old woman. The old woman explained that the traveller had told her an amazing secret about Nian. The monster was afraid of the colour red, loud noises, and fire. The old woman and the traveller had covered the village houses with red paper banners. They had lit firecrackers. They had found every pot and pan they could and banged on them loudly. The monster had turned away from the village because it was scared by the noise and the colour. The following year, all of the villagers stayed behind in the village for the Lunar New Year. They lit firecrackers, banged on drums, and wore the colour red. Nian was nowhere to be seen. From that day to this, the New Year is celebrated in the same way. The villagers know that Nian is only asleep and could easily wake up and decide to attack their town. So each year they use firecrackers, drums, and the colour red to keep him away. The end. And that's that. So now you know why the Chinese always have fireworks for their New Year's, right? It's to scare away the monster Nian. As well as that, the colour red, to scare away Nian. This is why in China, red is seen as a colour of good luck. Even the Chinese name for year is Nian. It's named after the monster, or the monster's named after the year, whichever way you want to look at it. This story brings in the association that the beginning of a new year is usually the beginning of new fortunes, or good luck. For example, during this time you often hear the phrase 恭喜发财, which literally means I hope you get rich. Now, of course, I am not implying that the Chinese society is purely materialistic. Getting rich could mean an abundance of things, such as rich with happiness, rich with memories and good times, etc., etc. And as for these stories, I would like to give a big shout out to a website called Twinkle, the website where I managed to get these stories and edit them myself. If you are a teacher like me, you can find a lot of resources on this website. Some are free, and some you have to pay for. They haven't asked me to promote them or anything, by the way, but I feel like I had to reference them, as most of the narrative stories came from their PowerPoints on the website that they provide. Now, of course, the PowerPoint wasn't perfect for me, so I just edited it, and that was totally fine. So that's that. I hope you enjoyed the stories, and I hope you all enjoy this new year. Hopefully this year, the year of the ox, will be so much better than the year of the rat last year. And for the next podcast, I could go on to more of the philosophies that sprung up during the spring and autumn period, but I think I've spent enough time here, and perhaps in the future I will refer back to some of them, especially the likes of Mozi, or the Western term, Mohism. But for now, I want to get moving forward, chronologically at least, to the next phase of Chinese history, the War and States period. And I'm sorry to say, the next episode will not be next week, but the week after. Just because I want to be sure that I get time to get my facts in order. It's been a while since I looked at the War and States era, so I need to refresh my memory a little as well. Sorry about that. Now, that's an end of this podcast episode. And I wish you all well, stay safe, and happy Chinese New Year. 新年快乐!